Coming up on Mountain News this morning, Governor Andy Beshear and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman started their second term in office yesterday. And we learn more about the ACLU abortion lawsuit that came out at the end of last week.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News this morning.
Good morning, I'm Olivia Calfee. The time is 6 a.m. on Wednesday, December 13th. Now let's check in with First Alert meteorologist Shane Smith for a look at your forecast this morning. And Shane, another chilly start to our morning. It's feeling like December, but I know you mentioned some clouds are moving in. Luckily, we won't see any rain when that comes, so that's positive.
Yeah, that's right, Olivia. The cold front bringing in those clouds. You know, typically when we talk about a cold front, you expect some rain with it, but it's a dry front. Going to bring just a few clouds and some cooler temperatures. You can see those clouds starting to stream into the southern part of the coverage area right now on the satellite radar picture, especially down places like Middlesboro, Harlan, Whitesburg, over towards Norton and Wise, Virginia. And I think the rest of us will see clouds build throughout the remainder of the morning. Dry right now, Mount Vernon, under partly cloudy skies. Outside the WYMT studio, we are seeing mainly clear skies, 30 degrees. Those clouds in Whitesburg helping to bump the temperature there up to 35. It's 26 right now into Manchester, 28 Williamsburg, 26 Middlesboro, 36 in Pikeville, 37 Jackson, and 30 for my friends up in Moorhead this morning. Not much of a wind chill this morning because the winds are calm, and as we get you heading out the door, we're heading into the upper 40s with a mix of sun and clouds today. A few points during the late morning, early afternoon, we may be close to overcast, but then those clouds should thin out a bit this afternoon. And we've got more dry weather heading our way for a couple of days, but rain is in the forecast. We'll talk about when to expect that here in a few minutes, Olivia.
All right, thank you, Shane. After an all-day celebration in Frankfort as Governor Andy Beshear and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman began their second term in office, the Beshear-Coleman administration say their work is not finished. The governor took the podium with energy and excitement, promising investments in educators and infrastructure expansion, but also acknowledging the road that led us here was full of challenges and heartache.
When tornadoes leveled towns and flooding carried away homes and even loved ones, we came together. Neighbors pulling neighbors from their basements or carrying fellow Kentuckians through the current. Thank you to our National Guard and first responders for their amazing response.
The governor said his family and faith have been a strong force to lean on during tests of will and patience.
And for me, remembering that my Savior could have been the Prince of Power, but he chose to be the Prince of Peace.
Eastern Kentucky native and country music star Tyler Childers performed Universal Sound during the ceremony. Poet Laureate Silas House read an original poem for the inauguration titled Those Who Carry Us. Inauguration Day festivities started early yesterday morning with a breakfast reception at the Kentucky Historical Society. That was followed by a non-denominational worship service at First Christian Church. It was a non-denominational service as Governor Beshear and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, their families, and faith leaders from around the Commonwealth gathered together. And as the governor looks ahead to the next 4 years, he also reflected on the last 4. Survivors of both the tornadoes in western Kentucky and the flooding in eastern Kentucky were part of the inaugural parade. Perry County's 3 high schools put aside rivalries to march in the inauguration parade together. It comes nearly a year and a half after deadly floods hit the mountains.
We compete like crazy against each other during the week, but in something like this, we all came together, and if you read their sign, it's one community and one recovery, and that's what we're doing.
Survivors of the western Kentucky tornadoes were also in the parade, with those living in the Dawson Springs area looking back on how the community has worked together to rebuild these past 2 years. And in a grand tradition, last night, the Capitol Rotunda hosted the Grand March. It's a formal presentation featuring the governor, lieutenant governor, and other constitutional officers who will take their oaths on January 1st. Music was provided by Orchestra Kentucky of Bowling Green. Governor Beshear will be working in a state capitol surrounded by Republicans. And while Governor Beshear's inaugural theme was Forward Together, there's questions if the executive and legislative branches can find ways to work together to pass bills during the next 4 years. Lawmakers in the minority party hope so and believe that's what voters want.
They like what he's doing. And they want him to succeed because they know if he succeeds and the General Assembly goes along with it, Kentucky succeeds.
And we also reached out to Republican leadership, but were not able to interview anyone yesterday. The next legislative session begins January 2nd. Flags will be lowered to half staff at all state buildings starting this morning in honor of the 54th governor, Julian Carroll. Carroll served as governor from 1974 to 1979. Prior to that, he was lieutenant governor from 71 to 74. Carroll will lie in state Friday in the state capitol rotunda. You can honor him from 10 a.m. to 12:30 or from 1:30 to 5 p.m. A memorial service will take place in between. He was 92 years old. We have an update on the ACLU's newly filed class action lawsuit challenging Kentucky's abortion bans. The case was filed on Friday with a Jane Doe who was about 8 weeks pregnant. The ACLU said in a statement yesterday that the plaintiff has learned her embryo no longer has cardiac activity. Julia Sandor spoke to advocates who say this is still an ongoing fight.
It's been more than a year since nearly all abortions were banned in Kentucky. Just last week, a Kentucky woman filed a lawsuit challenging the state's ban. The Commonwealth currently has a 6-week abortion ban and a trigger law, which bans abortions, with the only exception being to save the life of the patient or prevent serious injury. There are no exceptions for rape or incest.
It's really important that people understand that our reproductive health is tenuous at best in Kentucky, and that Jane Doe is incredibly brave, and we are so honored and proud to stand with her in this fight to obtaining our reproductive rights back in Kentucky.
In a statement from the ACLU's Reproductive Freedom Project Deputy Director, Bridget Amiri, she says that the plaintiff has learned her embryo no longer has cardiac activity. It says in part, Kentuckians like Jane should be able to focus solely on their health and should not have to worry about bringing a lawsuit. They add that, unfortunately, patient-led challenges like Jane's are our only path forward to strike down the bans under the right to privacy and right to self-determination.
And if there is anybody watching who, like Jane Doe, finds themselves pregnant and wanting an abortion, this is a class action lawsuit, and they can also join us.
Julia Sandor, WKYT.
Your current time, 6:08. Let's take a quick look at the forecast, and we are seeing mainly dry conditions across southern and east Kentucky on this Wednesday. Outside the WYMT studio, we are seeing just a few passing clouds. Temperature at 30 right now, 36 for my friends over in Pikeville. Mostly clear right there, although the clouds will thicken up here in just a few hours. And Somerset, a little colder down in the Cumberland Valley, 28 degrees right now as we speak. Here's a look at the current temperatures across the area. 37 into Jackson, 28 Harlan and Williamsburg, 26 for Middlesboro and Monticello. When you factor in the wind, it is feeling just a degree or two cooler in some spots, but overall not much of a wind chill this morning. We are seeing calm conditions, and as we go throughout the next 12 hours, those temperatures are going to climb to near 50 degrees for highs. Most spots end up just a little bit under that, but the forecast takes a turn towards the soggy side potentially for the second half of your weekend. We'll map that out coming up in just a few minutes, Olivia.
Thank you, Shane, and thanks for joining Mountain News this morning. More news is on the way. Coming up, President Biden meets with the families of hostages held in Gaza as he warns Israel of its diminishing popularity.